Hey there, it's Matt here from the Pure Property Podcast. I'm obviously here today with my co-host, Toby.
Wow.
Roles reversed today. Just thought we'd mix it up because obviously a lot of the time
Yeah,
with Toby, and I
Matt do the
understand,
intro.
guys,
Yeah,
it's a bit repetitive hearing Toby again and again. But have you been, Toby?
been good. Been very,
Yeah?
very good. Yeah, definitely.
Good. Obviously, we've got a topic today which I think's quite important to go over, which I think will be a big insight. I've had a few questions personally from investors on this, so
Yep.
I think it'll be interesting. Do you want to let the guys know what topics we will be covering today?
Yeah, so in today's episode, we're going to be going over how to navigate the regulation changes for landlords in 2024. As Matt said, big topic. You will see, obviously, with Labour coming in now,
Yeah.
the new government, they're getting their feet in nice and firmly, and we're starting to see what they're looking to do. And yeah, the rental market, landlords, and property has been mentioned by them. As we know, housing market is a big thing for new governments.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're going to go over the main changes in today's episode. In previous episodes, we have spoken about Labour's manifesto, so some of this has been covered to a degree. But like I said, now they're in power, we're starting to see what they're actually following through with. So, look, an introduction to the key changes of 2024 that we've seen, that Labour have announced, and we're seeing come to fruition. We've got the Renters Reform Bill, which is, in Parliament, and we've also got the EPC requirements that they have announced as well, which will be coming in. And all things as landlords that we have to take into massive consideration. Very big things, The Renters Reform Bill is, shaping the landscape of how we're renting our property. What rights tenants have. What powers we have as well as landlords. So that's massive. And then the EPC requirements for the future. This is stuff that you have to factor in now, because when that comes into play, it's going to have a big effect on the rental market for landlords. And we'll come on to why. But let's start with the Renters Reform Bill. You must have this brought up a lot. 'Cause, I know you're talking to investors on a regular basis. You must have this come up.
Yeah, a few people have definitely highlighted a few points, as you said there, Toby. Even with the whole Labour thing coming in, I think it was a new change in government. People, I think, wanted to see what happened and let the dust settle, as you would call it. So I think it's interesting to see. Obviously, as you said, I mean, we spoke actually about a couple of these topics a little while ago on I think it was a podcast. Might have been, I think, late last year, maybe early this year, maybe. I think it was late last year.
Well, yeah, because obviously the Conservatives had a Renters Reform Bill that we'd gone over.
We talked about a few things. So there was a few topics, as you said, that have been highlighted here. But I think, as you said there as well, Toby, in the last episode, about it could maybe change the way people, maybe a lot of landlords leaving the market. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what actually comes of it. And I still, even with what's potentially being brought in, etc., I don't think it's massively scary in terms of from if you look at it, as we always say, from a different perspective. I think a lot of people are very kind of single-minded, just looking at it from one aspect and thinking, it's making obviously more attractive for obviously your renters instead of the landlords, and landlords are going to be exiting because of that. But there's also other avenues of, for example, the EPC stuff, which I know we'll cover in a second, that is, I think, is actually a real positive.
Yeah. No, I think you're right there. I think on the face of it, it always sounds scary, but when you do dig down into it, it's not actually that bad.
No.
I mean, the Renters Reform Bill, there's stuff in there. We'll cover one main one, which is probably the biggest topic that a lot of people will want to know about or are speaking about. But, there's things in there where you can't discriminate against tenants with pets or, on benefits and that sort of thing, which, again, it's not the end of the world. I mean, one, you shouldn't really anyway. But two, it's just saying that you can't outright say, I don't want anyone with pets. You have to be open to having them. And, you then have a choice whether to or not. There's ways around it, but you can't discriminate, which again is good for the rental market, because you can get good tenants that have got pets, which are absolutely fine. But I think the main one that we'll cover in the Renters Reform Bill is the abolishment of the Section 21, which is no fault evictions.
Yep, which I think is a topic that I think is scared most people, hasn't it? A lot of people have been, I guess, caught in two minds about this. Some very kind of negative comments about it, some very positive as well.
Yeah.
I think that in terms of that, as you said, there's a couple of other sections that kind of maybe counteract that and can help you in other ways, which I know we talked about once again, which maybe we'll highlight today.
Yep.
But yeah, in terms of that, I think it does give obviously the renters a little bit more power in that sense to an extent. To an extent, but I also think in that sense it actually gets rid of a load of negative landlords that are maybe just doing it.
Yeah, look,
there's two ways to look at it. What's your insight on it? It'll be interesting to see what you think.
I mean, the whole like real negative outlook and headline grabbing stuff on abolishing Section 21, it really does actually wind me up a bit now, because all you're getting rid of is no fault evictions. What that means is you can't just for no reason at all be like, I'll get out of my property now.
Yeah.
So, and that's what people read into that, I've got no power over my property. Well, no, what it's saying is if you have a reason to get your property back, then you can evict the tenants. So, for example, if they've got antisocial behaviour, if you're selling your property, like there's lots of scenarios where you can and you'll have the power to get your property back. All this is saying is you can't for no reason just throw a tenant out. And realistically, I've never heard of it. The letting agents that I deal with, I know and I speak with, or who I network with, I don't know many of them that have gone, oh yeah, I had a landlord ring up and say, I just feel like checking my tenant out today. It just doesn't happen. But again, it can be perceived, people get hung up on, oh, I'm losing power. No, you're not losing power. You will be fine. And all it's doing is giving an extra layer of protection to tenants. A tenant who's got nothing wrong with them, it might be a case of, the way I think this may be perceived to some landlords, and this will be very, very, very small percentage, is like, I want to chuck my tenant out to get more rent. And if you're a landlord thinking like that, then you're not really in it for, obviously we're here to make money as landlords, but it's not the best attitude to have. That's the only scenario I could think of where you would chuck a tenant out for no reason.
Yeah.
So look, that's my rant on it. But look, I don't think it's a bad thing. It shouldn't put landlords off. You're still going to have powers as landlords to get tenants out for legitimate reasons, with a reason behind it. I've heard landlords go, well, what if I want to sell? Yes, you can get your tenant out if you're selling the property, because you'll still have a right to do so, because you have a reason to ask the tenant to leave. So, yeah, I mean, do you think I'm wrong? Or
no, I think you're right in terms of, as you said, I mean, the main reasons, I think if I'm thinking it from a personal perspective as well, it would be the exact same thing. Like if I was looking to sell, probably the only time I'm generally, they're not looking after the property correctly, they're the only two reasons realistically that I would want to change anything.
Yeah.
As you said, the only different topic that, as you said there, is about if rents were going up and they weren't agreeing to it. But look, if it's a marginal increase and it's something that's within market reason, then fair enough. If you're going and asking for £200-300 more when the rents aren't going up, then of course it's a bit crazy. So I think it's within reason, isn't it?
Yeah, but look, the renters reform bill, it's coming through. As I said, there are different bits and pieces, to help sort of protect tenants, but also give landlords some better protection as well. There will look to be an overhaul of the system as well in terms of getting tenants out, the legal system, the legal side, which needs to be done for this to actually work. So hopefully there should be some positivity. So positivity in terms of tenants will feel more secure in the property, because there's some more rights for them there, more protection, and also as landlords, hopefully the system will improve, and it'll be a better landscape as well. So look, there will be some pros and cons, and some people may see it in a more negative light, but overall I don't think it's anything that bad. I don't think it should put you off investing. All this is going to do is scare the old school landlords who, to be fair, majority are probably not good for the market anyway, because if they don't like this, then they're not good for the rental market, because they haven't got overall good interest, let's be honest. So again, let them leave and let the new landlords come in who do understand the landscape and the market and be better across the board.
Out with the old, in with the new.
Exactly. So that's renters reform bill, and I would recommend looking up the bill, because as I said, there's lots in there, and we wouldn't be able to cover it all in this episode anyway. But the main one I wanted to go over was the sort of abolishing Section 21, because that is the main one you see in the headlines and talks about. But coming on to the announcement of, the EPC upgrade, which is going to be required. So they are saying, Labour, that it will be a requirement for rental properties to have a EPC rating of C or above, obviously, by 2030.
Yeah.
So technically, you've got 6 years to think about this and bring this into play. This is quite a big thing.
Yeah.
For the landlords with older, less energy efficient properties, because this will come at a cost.
Yes.
As we know.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, have you ever gone through an EPC rating in depth?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, it's to deal with the structure of how it is. Obviously, how efficient the property is in terms of for the qualities of your windows and insulation. Obviously, it's loads of parts, really, isn't it? When we really look into the finer details, but I think there's two ways to look at it. Once again, I think it's a positive in terms of for the renter side, and also as a landlord, you'd feel kind of proud knowing that you're kind of renting out a property that is going to maybe a nice family, and they're kind of being looked after, and their bills aren't crazily high because of obviously it's not well insulated, and in the winters it's freezing cold, in the summers it's boiling hot because of it's not very well built for whatever reason. As you said, maybe just an old property, which there's a lot of old properties out there. But as you said, I think if you've got an old property and you're having to do a lot of work to get it up to a C or above, it could be very costly in some scenarios. Definitely with some of these properties that have been around for years and years.
Well, look, as you touched on, it is good overall. You get more energy efficient properties. It's going to help renters with bills, etc. It's something that's a positive, but massive warning, you're going to see landlords exiting the market because of this.
Yes.
Because it's
100%.
going to cost a lot of money for a lot of landlords with older, less efficient properties.
Some of them big as well, big properties that are very expensive, and works nowadays are not cheap, are they, to come in and get someone to fully kit out or do something. Well,
look, and this is how it's going to be sort of obviously portrayed, and this will be the narrative from a landlord's point of view. It's like, look, mortgage rates have gone up. It's getting a lot tighter in terms of yields and income and money.
The margins,
exactly. Like, where is the money to pay for all of this work that's needed? So they'll just go, do you know what? I'll cash out and I'll exit the market. So it's a positive because it's going to get better homes coming into the rental market. But the negative is you're going to have landlords exiting. That means there's going to be less properties, and that means going to be less supply. And that's going to really be a detriment to the rental market, and most likely push up rental prices, which we've seen before with an exodus within the rental market. And that's going to cause issues. That said, you've got 6 years to plan for this. Now, EPCs, if you're a landlord and you're listening to this and you have a property, you need an EPC. So get your EPC. You don't have to call your letting agent or anything like that, or a solicitor, where's my EPC? Just go on the internet. There's an EPC register online via the government. You type your postcode in, and as long as you've got an EPC, which will be valid for 10 years, you type in your postcode and it will give you EPC. Your EPC, as you touched on earlier, it will tell the rating, how efficient your property is, and it'll also tell you what is recommended to improve the rating. And that's what you need to take note of, what is needed. Usually in older properties, there's simple stuff you can do, which can be quite cost effective, like insulation, maybe upgrading the boiler, even changing lights to more energy efficient lights. There's lots of things which are quite easy, but Sometimes there may be costly stuff like you might have to change your windows. There could be more costly stuff
New
involved.
roof.
Yeah. If your heating system is very old, it may be a case of massively overhauling the heating system and changing everything in there. So it can be very costly in some scenarios.
Looks like just gonna have to stick to buying new builds then.
But look, this is what we've actually been talking about for some time. Again, on this podcast, and one thing we focus at for our investors, being a hands-off investor, we focus on new build, new properties. One, because it's easier for them to look after, less hassle in terms of refurb works, etc. But we've been saying a long time, like, this is going to come in at some point.
Yeah.
And if you're not prepared for it, it's going to cost you a lot of money. Look, if you've been in the property game for a long time with an older property, I would hope you've accumulated enough profit and enough money over the long term to go, actually, it's not a massive dent to me. I'll pay for it. But, if you haven't been in that long and you haven't got the profit stacked up, that's where it'll be an issue. So my recommendation to landlords listening to this, check out your EPC. If it's below the rating of a C, look at what is needed to do it and start forecasting for it. Maybe do it in stages. So,
so it's not
next
a big
year you
cost
might do
straight away.
insulation. Yeah. The following year you may save a bit more and do the boiler, So that is what I'd recommend. Start preparing for this now, because it will come in. Even if they delay it by, 2030 may come closer and they might say, look, we're not ready for this. But what they'll do is they'll just push it back a few years.
Isn't it?
It's a lot. And I think they don't understand not they don't understand. I don't think they've really thought through the actual logistics of it all. And I think that's where, that's why the Conservatives had this in place and they postponed it. And I think
it's a massive job, isn't it, to try and get every single home in the UK up to that kind of standard.
Yeah, but don't expect that to happen. In your head as a landlord, you need to be prepared that 2030 you're going to need an EPC of C or above. Now, I have looked into it a bit more because this is quite a big subject, and there may actually be some exemptions for landlords. So do bear this in mind. And again, this is going to be for landlords with older properties. So apparently there is potentially a high cost exemption. So if the cost of improvements go over a certain limit, then you're exempt. So, haven't got the information of that just yet, but that will be quite handy if that is the case, as long as it's a reasonable amount. Also, which is quite interesting, they're saying there's a 7-year payback exemption. So this is where if the cost of improvements can't be recouped through energy savings, so again, as a landlord, you're not actually going to physically see that money, but if it won't save the same amount in energy over the 7-year period, then you're exempt. If all improvements made exemption. So this is where if you've made, this will never happen, but what it says is if you've made all the improvements and the property still doesn't meet the EPC rating, you're exempt. Well, that makes no sense, really, because if you're making the improvements, that's because they've been recommended. But anyway, I won't even go into that because it just, it puts my head in a spin. Wall installation exemption. So if wall installation would negatively impact the property, which can happen in some scenarios in certain types of properties, then you're exempt from that. Consent exemption. So if required consents for improvements can't be obtained, so if there are planning sort of restraints or something like that which stops you doing it, there's that. Obviously maybe listed buildings, that they would have constraints on them as well. Devaluation exemption. Again, I wouldn't really see this happen often, if at all, but if improvements would devalue the property. And then this one's quite an interesting one, and I want to find out more about this. But new landlord exemption. So if the landlord has only recently acquired the property, they'll be exempt.
That's interesting.
Yeah, which is
interesting to see what the T's and C's are based around that, though.
But that's to a C standard. Like, for example, now mortgage companies won't rent on a property that's D or below. So again, I would say if this is coming in, that may be an exemption. But what will happen is, when this is coming into play, lenders, and this is something as well as a nano you need to think of, will go, well, I'm not going to lend on that. because it's not a C. So although they're saying that will probably be only for cash buyers, because when this comes in, I'll be very surprised if lenders will lend on anything below a C, which makes sense, of course.
Yeah.
So that's the potential exemptions. But look, if we do look at the positive there, obviously you got better homes potentially coming in, so that'd be good. I think financial adjustment wise for landlords, again, this is coming into sort of planning as a landlord. As mentioned, if you've got a property there where you've got equity in, you may look at maybe remortgaging, pulling out some of the equity, and using that to upgrade it. So then you're not losing your asset, because I always say, if you can stay in the market as a landlord and hold your asset for long as possible, do it. You never sort of come out and then try and get back in, because it's always harder and you never do as well. So look, if you've got some equity there, use that. If not, just look, whatever cash funds you've got available, or start setting some aside for this. Just be planning financially wise for this. Start working out the costings for that. And sometimes there can be some grants. So look on the government website. Sometimes there's grants. I know they've done stuff for insulation and stuff before. So it is quite a big thing. But look, any work you do to the property now as well, that's why I said, if you do refinance and use the equity that you've built into it and do it, you have to remember, this is actually going to add value to your property.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if
improvements,
anybody looking for these properties going forward, they're going to be looking for ones with higher ratings,
energy efficient,
even now. So if you've got a property which is rated higher now, that's going to put you in a much better position on the market.
Yeah,
especially if you've got an older property as well and you've done the improvements and the rating's higher. When you come to resell, it's going to help with the value of the property, because it's going to be in more demand.
Yeah.
But any sort of advice or anything you can give?
I want to say the points that you just said there, to be fair, are spot on, to be fair, Toby, in the sense of, as you said, I think it definitely changes a few things for certain people, not for everyone.
Yeah.
I'm interested, similar to what you said, to find out more about some of these ways of getting around it, but how long does that also last for until they're then wanting that standard to be up to the C or above? I think it may also be interesting to see how now investors invest, in terms of it might change their strategy to, instead of buying maybe older properties and doing them up, or older homes in general, as you said, if they want no hassle and hands off, I'd be looking at the new builds even more so now than ever, in terms of whether that be houses or apartments. Yeah. Because I think it's massive. I mean, it's an extra bit of work that you're going to have to think about, isn't it? If you're setting aside an extra bit of money each month, or thinking at some point I've got to get this up to a good standard, it's going to be dipping into your profits. And also it's going to take a bit of time to understand what improvements you need to make as well. So,
I mean, not even just to the investor market. I was speaking to an estate agent the other day, because he made a comment about my house and the EPC, because it's one of the best EPCs. And he was saying, he said, you'd be surprised. He's like, they now get a lot of requests and questions around the EPC.
Yeah, which you probably never used to get.
No,
as much.
And that's homeowner occupiers. They're a lot more conscious because of the cost of living, fuel prices going up, electricity, all this sort of stuff going up. They're now more conscious as well. Not just landlords looking to buy for investment purposes, but they are more conscious of it as well. So on the open market, having a property with a better EPC is going to put you in good stead to really get the most value and increase your value of your property. So I think you're right. I think newer properties are going to become more popular. We've seen it already. Even in the rental properties, we've seen more efficient properties become more popular, because tenants you know the running costs, and we're seeing it now even more so with homeowner occupiers. So it's definitely something to factor in for the long term of your property, for the property you've got now, and also the properties that you'll be buying in the future. And if you are stuck on regulation and stuff like that, you want to be talking to your letting agent out there as well, because they'll be in the know. They'll be getting all the up-to-date information on regulations and what's needed for your property. So make sure you're utilising the professionals in that way as well. Look, having a better property like this, a more energy efficient property, is definitely going to help with tenant retention.
For sure.
And, the demand for your property and potentially your rental price as well. Because if tenants are going to say, well, actually, it's cheaper to run that property because the EPC is really, really good than it is to run that property, which is, old and you've got bad energy rating, then they don't mind paying a bit more for that because they're saving money potentially in the long run. So there's a lot to think of. So look, in conclusion, it's definitely a big change that's come into the property market, and you need to be prepared for it as a landlord, whether you own properties now or you are looking to buy. But overall, as these things are, it is a positive thing for tenants, giving them better quality of homes. And if you are ahead of the curve and, prepared for this, as a landlord, an investor, you can potentially do well and benefit from this in more ways than one. As I said, value of your property, rental demand, and rental price as well.
Yeah.
What's your final thoughts?
I think you've covered it there in a nutshell, Toby. I think, everything you've mentioned there is obviously relevant to what you need to be looking into. And look, as you said, it's a medium to long-term game at the end of the day. So you do want to be making decisions off of what you do today in terms of if you want an easy life and an easy kind of hands-off portfolio as such, then these are things you should be starting to look at. Absolutely. It's key to plan ahead and to make sure that when things do change, that you're in a position where you haven't got to do a hell of a lot. It's going to save you a lot of time and money potentially. So it's definitely just, I think, for some people anyway, just re-strategizing and maybe rethinking how they invest their funds if they do want to continue investing into property or are new to it. I think it definitely gives people this episode in general has given people some, hopefully, a good insight to what potentially things you should be keeping an eye out for.
Good. All right then. Well, thanks for joining us for another episode. Look, if you do have any questions around this, we have said obviously speak to your letting agent, but if you do want to pop in an email, info@trackcapital.co.uk, I'll be happy to answer anything I can or point you in the right direction. So any help or advice you need, where we can help, we will. But thanks for joining us on this episode, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.